What happens when Hollywood's most outspoken blue-collar actor meets late-night television's most smug host? You won't believe what unfolds when Mark Wahlberg sits down with Stephen Colbert for what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview behind the glittering facade of late-night entertainment. A powder keg was about to explode, revealing the true character of one of television's most celebrated hosts. The cameras were rolling, the audience was laughing, but nobody was prepared for the verbal warfare that would erupt between these two titans, ultimately leading to one of the most shocking exits in talk show history. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two collide in spectacular fashion. The Ed Sullivan Theater buzzed with its usual pre-show energy as audience members filed into their seats, completely unaware they were about to witness television history. Mark Wahlberg had arrived that afternoon to promote his latest action thriller, a gritty Boston-set crime drama that seemed tailor-made for the former rapper turned A-list actor. His publicist had briefed him on the standard talking points, the physical demands of the role, working with the director, and his ongoing production projects. It was meant to be another routine stop on the promotional circuit, the kind of appearance Wahlberg had done hundreds of times before. But Stephen Colbert had other plans brewing behind his trademark glasses and calculated smile. Sources backstage later revealed that the host had been particularly agitated that day, frustrated by recent criticism of his political commentary and falling ratings that had network executives breathing down his neck. The pressure was mounting, and Colbert seemed determined to create a viral moment that would remind everyone why he commanded the late-night landscape. What better target than Wahlberg, whose working-class Boston roots and conservative-leaning views made him an easy foil for Colbert's liberal elite persona. As the show's signature music filled the theater and Colbert delivered his opening monologue with his usual theatrical flair, there was an unmistakable edge to his performance. The jokes landed with the studio audience, but seasoned observers noticed something different in his delivery, a sharpness that suggested he was priming for conflict. When he announced Wahlberg as his guest, the applause was warm and genuine, exactly what you'd expect for one of Hollywood's most bankable stars. Wahlberg strode onto the stage with his characteristic confidence, the kind of swagger that had carried him from the mean streets of Dorchester to the heights of Hollywood success. He wore a simple black suit, no flashy accessories or designer flourishes, just the unpretentious style that had become his trademark. The initial greeting between host and guest appeared cordial enough, with the standard handshake and pleasantries that viewers had come to expect from these interactions. "Mark Wahlberg, everybody," Colbert announced with theatrical enthusiasm, gesturing toward his guest as the audience continued their applause. "Thanks for being here, Mark. I have to say, you're looking good for a guy who gets up at 4 a.m. to work out." Wahlberg settled into the guest chair with a slight smile, already sensing something off in Colbert's tone. "Well, Stephen, discipline is everything. Some of us believe in earning what we get through hard work, not just talking about other people's work." The comment landed with subtle precision, and astute viewers could see Colbert's expression shift almost imperceptibly. His smile remained fixed, but his eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Oh, is that a shot at talk show hosts? Because I'll have you know, this job requires tremendous skill. Not everyone can sit behind a desk and ask penetrating questions about the human condition." "Penetrating questions," Wahlberg repeated, his Boston accent becoming more pronounced as his guard went up. "Come on, Stephen. Most of your questions are just setups for your own political rants. When's the last time you actually listened to an answer instead of planning your next lecture?" The studio audience fell unusually quiet, sensing the shift in dynamics, but not yet understanding the full scope of what was unfolding. Colbert's laugh came out forced and brittle, lacking his usual theatrical warmth. "Well, Mark, some of us believe in using our platform to address important issues, rather than just flexing in front of mirrors and pretending to be tough guys from Boston." The gloves were officially off. Wahlberg leaned forward in his chair, his jaw tightening as Colbert's condescending tone registered fully. "Pretending, Stephen? I grew up in Dorchester when it was actually dangerous, not when it was gentrified for trust fund kids to feel edgy. Everything I've accomplished came from real work, real risk, real sacrifice. What's your story? You make fun of people who actually build things while you sit in your ivory tower, making jokes for coastal elites who've never worked a day in their lives." Colbert's mask of civility was beginning to crack, revealing the arrogance that his critics had long accused him of harboring. "Oh, please, Mark. The tough guy act might work in your movies, but this is the real world. You're an actor who pretends for a living, just like the rest of us. The difference is I don't pretend my entertainment has some deeper moral significance. At least I'm honest about what I do, Wahlberg shot back, his voice rising slightly. I make movies that people actually want to watch. I don't lecture them about how they should think or vote while I count my millions and live in my Manhattan bubble. You want to talk about pretending? You've made a career out of pretending you're just a regular guy while you mock everyone who doesn't share your precious liberal values. The tension in the studio was now palpable, with audience members exchanging uncomfortable glances and production staff visible in the wings, clearly unsure whether to intervene. Colbert's producer could be seen frantically gesturing from behind the cameras, but the host seemed oblivious to anything except his growing animosity toward his guest. Liberal values. Colbert's voice dripped with disdain as he leaned back in his chair, adopting the posture of someone preparing to deliver a killing blow. You mean values like education, compassion, and critical thinking? I know those concepts might be foreign to someone whose biggest intellectual achievement was learning to read cue cards, but some of us actually care about making the world a better place. The insult hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and Wahlberg's face darkened with genuine anger. His hands gripped the arms of his chair. And for a moment, it seemed like he might actually stand up and walk away. Instead, he took a deep breath and fixed Colbert with a stare that could have melted steel. Wahlberg said quietly, his voice now carrying a dangerous calm that was somehow more intimidating than his earlier anger. "There it is," Wahlberg said. "The real Stephen Colbert. Not the character you play, not the fake everyman routine, but the actual elitist snob who thinks he's better than everyone else. You sit here in your comfortable studio making millions by mocking people who actually work for a living, and you have the nerve to lecture me about making the world better." But this was only the beginning of what would become one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history. And Stephen Colbert was about to reveal just how far he was willing to go to maintain his perceived intellectual superiority. Colbert's response came with a venom that shocked even his most cynical critics. His carefully constructed public persona evaporated completely as he leaned forward, his voice dripping with contempt. "Oh, Mark, that's rich coming from someone whose greatest contribution to cinema is teaching audiences that Boston accents make bad acting seem authentic. You want to talk about real work? Try doing this job without a script, without multiple takes, without a director holding your hand through every scene." The studio audience had gone completely silent now, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Even the usual late-night crowd, accustomed to political sparring and celebrity roasting, seemed stunned by the personal nature of the attack. Wahlberg's face flushed red, but his voice remained controlled, carrying the quiet intensity of someone who had learned to channel rage into focused determination. Without a script, Wahlberg's laugh was harsh and humorless. "Stephen, you've been reading from the same liberal talking points for years. At least when I'm acting, I'm honest about it. You pretend this is spontaneous while you regurgitate whatever your writers tell you to say. The only difference between us is I don't pretend my job makes me morally superior to truck drivers and construction workers." Colbert's mask slipped further, revealing an ugliness that his admirers had never seen before. "Morally superior? Maybe not morally, but certainly intellectually. I went to Northwestern. I studied theater. I understand nuance and complexity. You went from juvenile delinquent to muscle-bound movie star without stopping to develop any actual depth or understanding of the world." The personal attack struck deep, and Wahlberg's composure finally began to crack. His voice rose as years of Hollywood condescension bubbled to the surface. "Juvenile delinquent? You want to go there, Stephen? Let's talk about my past. I made mistakes as a kid. Real mistakes with real consequences. And I've spent my adult life trying to make amends. I've created jobs, supported my community, and tried to give back. What have you done besides sit in judgment of people like me from your privileged perch?" But Colbert wasn't finished twisting the knife. With a smirk that revealed his true character, he delivered what he clearly thought would be the killing blow. "Well, at least I never spent time in jail for assaulting innocent people. Some of us managed to get through our youth without becoming criminals, Mark. Maybe that's the difference between someone with real character and someone who just plays characters on screen." The reference to Wahlberg's teenage conviction for assault sent shock waves through the studio. Even the production staff looked horrified at their host's willingness to weaponize a guest's well-documented past mistakes. Wahlberg went rigid in his chair, his hands clenching into fists as he struggled to maintain control. The cameras caught every nuance of his reaction, from the flash of pain in his eyes to the way his jaw worked as he processed the deliberate cruelty of the attack. "You son of a," Wahlberg started, then caught himself, taking a deep breath before continuing with deadly quiet. "You think bringing up something I did when I was 16 makes you clever? Something I've publicly apologized for? Something I've tried to make right my entire adult life? That's your idea of intelligent discourse." The audience remained frozen, uncertain whether to applaud, boo, or simply flee. This had gone far beyond the bounds of normal television conflict into something genuinely ugly and personal. Backstage, producers were frantically debating whether to cut to commercial, but Colbert showed no signs of backing down. If anything, Wahlberg's obvious pain seemed to energize him. "I'm just pointing out the contrast, Mark. Some of us believe in accountability, in facing the truth about ourselves and others. You want to attack my character while ignoring your own documented history of violence. That seems like a pretty significant blind spot for someone claiming moral authority." Wahlberg's response came with an intensity that made everyone in the studio lean forward. "Accountability. Stephen, I've been accountable for that mistake every day for 30 years. I've tried to reach out to the people I hurt. I've supported programs for at-risk kids. I've used my platform to talk about the consequences of violence. What accountability have you ever shown for the damage you do every night when you mock and demean people who don't share your worldview?" The host's laugh was sharp and mean. "Oh, please. Comparing a comedy show to actual assault, that's quite a reach, even for someone with your limited intellectual range. I make jokes, Mark. You put people in the hospital. I was a kid." Wahlberg exploded, finally losing the battle to contain his anger. "A stupid, scared kid from a broken neighborhood who made a terrible mistake. But I grew up. I changed. I became a better person. You're a grown man who makes millions tearing down people who can't fight back. And you act like that makes you a hero. At least I learned from my mistakes instead of building a career on them." Colbert's response revealed the full extent of his arrogance and cruelty. "Oh, I see. So now you're the victim. Poor Mark Wahlberg, misunderstood tough guy who just wants everyone to forget about his violent past. Well, here's a news flash from those of us who didn't spend our teens attacking innocent people. Actions have consequences, and some of us don't get to just pretend they never happened." The studio fell into a stunned silence so complete that the hum of the cameras seemed deafening. Wahlberg stared at Colbert with undisguised contempt, his chest rising and falling as he fought to control his breathing. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute conviction. "You know what, Stephen? You're right about one thing. Actions do have consequences. And right now, you're showing everyone exactly who you really are. Not the character you play, not the persona you've created, but the real Stephen Colbert, a bitter, cruel man who thinks his education and his platform give him the right to destroy people for entertainment." The confrontation had reached a point of no return. With both men's true natures fully exposed, Colbert seemed to realize he had gone too far, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. Instead, he doubled down with a comment that would seal his fate. "Well, Mark, at least I'm honest about who I am. I don't hide behind a fake working-class persona while living in a Beverly Hills mansion. I don't pretend to be something I'm not for the cameras." Wahlberg stood up slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled despite the rage burning in his eyes. The audience held its collective breath as he towered over the seated host. And for a moment, it seemed like the confrontation might turn physical. But instead, Wahlberg's response would be far more devastating than any punch he could have thrown. And Stephen Colbert was about to learn that some lines should never be crossed. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Wahlberg spoke, his voice carrying a quiet authority that commanded absolute attention. "You want to know the difference between us, Stephen? When I was 16 and made the worst mistake of my life, I was a kid with no guidance, no education, no opportunities. Trying to survive in a neighborhood where violence was normal. I had every excuse in the world, but I've never made excuses. I own what I did. I paid the price, and I've spent 30 years trying to earn redemption." He paused, letting his words sink in before delivering the crushing blow. "But you're a 50-year-old man with every advantage in life, education, wealth, platform, influence, and you choose to use all of that to tear people down for applause. You just spent 10 minutes trying to destroy someone on national television, not because you're ignorant or desperate or scared, but because you're cruel. And that makes you worse than I ever was, even at my lowest point." The color drained from Colbert's face as the devastating accuracy of the assessment hit home. For the first time in the entire confrontation, he seemed genuinely speechless, his usual quick wit failing him completely. The studio audience remained frozen, sensing they had witnessed something that would be talked about for years to come. Wahlberg wasn't finished. You know what really bothers you, Stephen? It's not that I made mistakes as a kid. It's that someone like me, someone you see as beneath you, became successful without your approval. It kills you that a juvenile delinquent from Dorchester can sell more movie tickets in a weekend than your show gets viewers in a month. It eats at you that people actually like me while they're getting tired of your act. The truth of those words hit like a physical blow. Colbert's ratings had indeed been declining, and the criticism of his increasingly bitter political commentary had been mounting. Industry insiders had whispered about network concerns, about focus groups showing viewer fatigue with his approach. Wahlberg had just voiced what everyone in the business knew, but was too polite to say. "That's why you invited me here tonight," Wahlberg continued, his analysis cutting deeper with each word. "Not to promote my movie, not for entertainment, but because you thought you could take me down and make yourself look smart in the process. You figured the working-class actor would be easy prey for the sophisticated host. Well, congratulations, Stephen. You showed everyone exactly who you really are." Colbert finally found his voice, but it came out weak and defensive. "Mark, I think you're overreacting. This is just show business, just entertainment. Don't take it so personally." The attempt to minimize what had just happened only fueled Wahlberg's righteous anger. "Just entertainment. You just tried to weaponize the biggest regret of my life for laughs, and now you want to pretend it was all in good fun. That's the problem with people like you, Stephen. You dish out cruelty and then act surprised when someone calls you on it." The audience was beginning to stir, with some people starting to applaud Wahlberg's words. The shift in the room's energy was palpable. What had started as a typical late-night crowd was transforming into something more like a jury rendering its verdict. Even some of the production staff could be seen nodding in agreement with the guests' assessment of their boss. "You want to lecture me about accountability?" Wahlberg pressed on, his voice gaining strength as he sensed the room turning in his favor. "Then be accountable for this. Be accountable for using your platform to bully people. Be accountable for the damage you do when you turn human beings into punchlines. Be accountable for thinking your college degree gives you the right to treat working people like they're less than you." Colbert made one last desperate attempt to regain control. "Well, this has certainly been illuminating, folks. I think we're seeing some real passion here, which is always interesting television." His nervous laugh died in his throat as Wahlberg fixed him with a look of pure contempt. "No, Stephen, what you're seeing is someone who's had enough of you. I came here to do a job, to promote a movie, to give your audience some entertainment. Instead, you decided to ambush me with personal attacks because you thought it would make you look clever. Well, mission accomplished. You look exactly as clever as you are." The devastating insult hung in the air as Wahlberg reached into his jacket and pulled out his microphone pack, switching it off with a decisive click. The symbolic gesture sent a clear message. This interview was over, and it was ending on his terms, not Colbert's. "I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, Stephen, but sitting here and letting you disrespect me isn't going to be one of them." Wahlberg's voice carried the finality of a judge delivering a sentence. "You can keep your fake apologies and your pathetic attempts to walk this back. Everyone watching knows what they just saw." He turned toward the audience, his demeanor completely transforming. As he addressed them directly, "I want to apologize to all of you for what you had to witness tonight. You came here for entertainment, not to watch someone's personal vendetta play out on television. You deserved better than this." The audience erupted in spontaneous applause, with many people rising to their feet in a show of support that clearly rattled Colbert further. The host sat frozen in his chair, watching his authority crumble in real time as his own audience turned against him. And Stephen Wahlberg said, turning back to face the now humiliated host one final time, "When your ratings tank and the network starts asking questions, remember this moment. Remember that you had a choice between being professional and being cruel, and you chose cruelty. That's on you, not on me, not on your writers, not on anyone else. That's the real Stephen Colbert. And now everyone knows it." With that, Mark Wahlberg walked off the stage with the dignity of a man who had stood his ground against a bully and emerged victorious. The cameras followed his departure, capturing every step of his measured exit as the audience continued their applause. Behind him, Stephen Colbert sat alone at his desk, the studio lights harsh and unforgiving on his stunned face. The weight of his miscalculations settling in as the applause for his departing guest thundered around him. The confrontation was over, but its impact had only just begun. In those final moments, television history had been made, careers had been defined, and the true character of both men had been revealed for all the world to see. The audience filed out, buzzing with excitement and disbelief, knowing they had witnessed something unprecedented, while Stephen Colbert was left to face the consequences of crossing a line that should never have been crossed.